Hey everyone! After taking a couple months break from making sock plushies, I thought I'd come back with a really exciting video, at least for me. Before we begin, I'd like to explain a bit of backstory and why this video was so exciting for me. So I kind of have a tradition of making my friends Moriah Elizabeth themed things for their birthdays. I'll talk a bit more about that later on because it's quite interesting. But this year I decided to make one of my friends a Georgie plushie, which is, this video. Now, this was quite an ambitious project for me, because I would be using many techniques I was just making up on the fly, and that I wasn't sure would even work. I'll talk more about why as these things come up, but in short, I was nervous about how the stretchy sock fabric was going to react with the not stretchy yarn stripes, and how I was going to achieve such detail on the very tiny feet. Spoilers, everything worked out absolutely amazingly, as you can see from these photos, and I'm really excited to be implementing these, what I thought were once impossible, new strategies in other plushies. And of course, I'll be going into further detail on all the things I just mentioned in this video. With all that out of the way, I'd just like to say, this is by no means a tutorial. First, this is not my own design. This is someone else's art that I'm just adapting into another medium for my personal use. Of course, all creative credit goes to Moriah Elizabeth. Second, in this video, I kind of gloss over all the basics of making fuzzy sock plushies and only show you guys the exciting experimental bits. And third, I was just making up things as I went, so I wouldn't be comfortable trying to teach someone else something that I was still learning myself. Okay, that was really long and I have a lot left to say, so let's get started. Okay, so when it comes to materials, I have this yellow sock that will work well for the body. The green is obviously for the leaves, and this orange is for the beak and the feet. I was considering needle felting those parts, but I decided not to. But that could change. We'll see when we get to it. And for the stripes, I'm thinking about using either this yarn or this yarn. This yarn would be very subtle, but then again, this yarn I think may be a bit too thick, because on the Georgie that I crocheted, this was too thick, but then again, that was like a very small scale like that, and this is going to be like a bit larger. So yeah, let's get started. So I started out super basic. If you've watched my 100 subscriber special, you've probably seen me do this a little over 80 times. Super self-explanatory, just the toe of the sock stuffed with toy stuffing, then running stitch closed. The only thing I did try to do is use the stuffing to kind of make a separation between the head and the body, but that didn't really work, although I'm not particularly upset about that. Funny thing is, I've made so many Moriah Elizabeth themed things, however, I don't own any of them anymore, so I don't have any professional photos to show you guys. The fuzzy sock pickle, which I made about a year ago, was my very first and I was so proud of it. Now, not so much. But one thing I did do with that was I made like a 3-minute iMovie video that's kind of cringe, kind of funny to go along with the gift. This was pre-Sugar Maple Crafts, but making that video was so fun for me, it was one of the things that prompted me to start my YouTube channel. I also made 2 crocheted versions of the Pickle the Dinosaur squishy, which I think could still be improved with another attempt, and a crocheted Georgie ornament. You'll probably hear me talking about the Georgie a bit in this video because I had to solve similar problems with that one as well, even if they were 2 different mediums. So now, before I can do anything else, I have to sew on the stripes, which is going to be quite nerve-wracking because it's kind of a pain to undo it, and also it's kind of difficult, so I may not film too much of it because, as I said, it's quite difficult, but basically what I'm going to do is, if you look at a reference image, you can see that, since it's a 3-dimensional object, the stripes are coming down like that across the surface. So if it has to connect to the other side, they have to be circles, almost. Hopefully that makes sense, but if you noticed on the Georgie plush, like the official one, it's 2 pieces of fabric sewn together, so the fabric is just striped like that, but obviously this is not that, so we have to do that kind of circular thing that you can kind of see in the two-dimensional images. So yeah, let's go do that. Okay, so I literally cannot explain anything for my life without writing a script, so here's a second, better explanation that hopefully makes sense. So if you look at a two-dimensional image of Georgie, you can see how the stripes have a curve to them. It's pretty safe to assume that the back of the drawing also has the same curved stripes. So what happens if you turn it in your mind to a side profile? The two sets of curved stripes have to meet, right? Which would imply that the stripes are really circles going around Georgie's body. Or maybe I'm just looking too deeply into everything, because this theory could be completely incorrect, because on the official Georgie plushie, they use two separate pieces of striped fabric, and there's a seam running along the outside. I still chose to make the circles on my version though, because it just seemed like the natural thing to do, given the medium. Now that I took way longer than necessary to explain the why, let's get on to the how. So this is some worsted weight yellow yarn that I'm embroidering onto the surface of the plushie. I'm doing this sort of backstitching and splitting the yarn thing that probably has a proper name, making sure to stitch pretty loosely, because one of the concerns I had when embroidering yarn on a stretchy fabric was that the fabric was going to stretch around the taut yarn and bulge out wherever the yarn wasn't. Thankfully that didn't happen though. I'm also laying the yarn around where I want it as a sort of guide every couple of stitches to make sure I'm on track. I did use the same technique on the crocheted Georgie that I made, so this was my second time doing it, although this time on a larger scale and with stretchy fabric. Okay, so I finished embroidering on all the stripes. I think it went relatively well. They're mostly straight, and I decided to use this side as the front, as opposed to the other side, because I think on this side I got like the angle of the stripes more accurately. So yeah, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the arms, and then we'll talk about the leaves as we come to them. The next thing I made were the arms, which were relatively straightforward. I don't have a ton to say about these because unlike a lot of the other parts of the plushie, these were pretty typical to what I usually do. I did make the first one a bit large, so I had to sew a new smaller line and trim off the unneeded excess. These weren't stuffed, as the raw edges inside were plenty. And here's what it looks like with both arms. The next thing I made were the pineapple leaves on top of his head. The original picture has 5, I believe the plushie may have more, like maybe 6, but I chose to make 4 because they were quite bulky due to the nature of fuzzy socks, and I knew from the crocheted version that they would fit better on the head if there were 4. Ideally, there should be 1 longer leaf, 2 medium ones, and 1 short one. I realized this after I'd drawn the shapes as too small and too large, so I just sewed a little more or a little less on each leaf respectively. These leaves were flipped and stuffed with a small amount of stuffing because I wanted to give them a bit of body on account of their longer length than the arms. Then they were just arranged and sewn onto the head. Even though they were technically the simplest, the leaves are definitely my favorite feature on the plush. So the next part is another part that I'm a bit nervous for because I'm not sure how I'm going to get the detail of the feet on such a small scale, and then also the beak. For the beak, I think I'm just going to make like a very simple shape, and then it's like iconic beak shape will be created when I sew it on. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do that, but the main concern right now is the feet. So yeah, I think I'm just going to try and make them and hope for the best. I was super nervous going into the feet because from past experience I knew it was basically impossible to get any sort of definition and shape on such a small scale. So I did what I could, drawing a rough shape, then sewing, stuffing, and closing it up as usual. Of course, it came out as a mostly shapeless blob, so what I chose to do was anchor a thread at the bottom of the foot, then make a big stitch between the toes and pull it tight. The thread was hidden by the sock's texture, and the toes were given a more defined shape. This technique won't work on every small scale shape, but it did work on the feet, which is quite exciting. I don't know how much I'll be able to utilize this technique in the future, but it really worked well on this project. Next, I made the beak, which was super simple. Finally, I superglued on some flat-backed beads for the eyes. Lastly, as one final touch, I embroidered on some of the details, like the eyebrows and feathers on the head with some tan thread. And with that, it was finished. I really love the result. Everything that could have gone right did go right, which is something that usually doesn't happen. I really hope you enjoyed this more experimental type of video. I know I had a lot of fun experimenting and achieving favorable results, and also nerding out about fuzzy sock plushies in the form of a 3-page script. Happy birthday to my friend that I made this for, even though this video is coming out very late. And if you're still here at the end of this very wordy video, feel free to subscribe for more fuzzy sock plushies, crochet tutorials, sewing videos, and whatever else I feel like doing. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.